Can you see the slide? PPT.
Sir, it is buffering, sir.
Ramachandran, Hajira.
Yes, sir, came now.
Okay, last class we saw what were the reasons for the revolt of 1857, and we saw it is not a what we called a immediate or spontaneous what we called a revolt, but it is a series of events and grievances which led to the revolt of 1857. And moreover, we have seen how the Britishers they were able to curtail this revolt using the Indian people itself. And moreover, this revolt of 1857 is largely a North Indian affair. The most parts of Eastern India, the Southern India, and Western India, some parts, they were largely peaceful. And educated class did not take part in this revolt of 1857. And moreover, uh, the high caste Brahmins and other priestly class, everybody, though they participated, the intelligentsia class did not participate because they don't want the priestly class to implement the regressive Indian tradition. So they wanted modernity, they wanted development, and they wanted good jobs for the education they had. So they did not take part. But all these intelligence class in after the 1857, we call the aftermath of the 1857 revolt, they start to get disillusioned with the British policies. Now, this 1857 revolt, what were the impact of this revolt of 1857? You can see that in 1857, the consequences that the administration, which was earlier under English East India Company, now this administration is taken back, and this company's role in Indian affairs is totally abolished, and directly London, the crown, takes over the administration. And moreover, there were significant change in the attitude of the British. That whether it is whether with respect to administrative structure, whether with respect to administrative structure, second one with respect to the policies of the government, these policies are both political and economic. There was a change, and moreover, the British attitudes, the British attitudes towards the Indian people changed. So Lord Canning, who was the Governor General during 1857, he convened a darbar. He convened a darbar at Allahabad. At Allahabad, and he read the Queen's proclamation. And what is this proclamation? That from 1st November, 1858 onwards, 1st November 1858 onwards, that the administration will be coming under the directly under the London, under the Queen. And moreover, Lord Canning was what we called elevated as Viceroy. There's a difference in Governor General and Viceroy because Viceroy is representing Queen in India. Viceroy. So Governor General had what we called powers in what we call autonomy powers, but now the Viceroy is directly representing the Queen in India. And moreover, from 2nd January 2nd Jan 1859 onwards, those who declared their what we called allegiance to the crown and laid down their arms, so they will be pardoned. Those sepoys will be pardoned, and they will be recruited again in the British Indian Army. They'll be recruited again in the British Indian Army. This was one among the significant, what we called, change in the attitude. And moreover, this era of territorial aggrandizement, expansion through territorial means, that is usurping from the native princes, stopped. And moreover, the economic drain of wealth started from 1857 onwards. And these economic policy and the political policies, we will look into the further, what we call the slides. And moreover, this 1857 change in the government, it gave an expression to the pledge that India Civil Service Act was passed. India Civil Services Act of 1867 was passed, and this act was passed is that because Crown started to implement its reforms, so that this India Service Act of 1861 gave an opportunity for this annual civil services competitive exam, which was held in London, will be more accommodative, and it will give what we called preeminence to the customs and ancient usages in India, with ancient usages, customs of India. So this change is a very significant change, and moreover, Indians were given little more prominence in administration with respect to civil services. And moreover, this Queen's proclamation, it also what we called made a peace covenant with the native rulers, because the Britishers what we called realized that most of the native states were very loyal to the British during the revolt of 1857. So then British wanted to honor them. So they stopped this what we call territorial expansion. Moreover, the British promised that we will respect your right, we will respect your rights, dignity, and honor with respect to the native states. And moreover, they passed this what they called act in which most of the rebels were set free. And this act of 1858, Government of India Act 1858, is also known as, the act is also known as Act of the Good, Act of the Good Government of India. This act is also known as Act of the Good Government of India. And moreover, this act, through this act of the Good Government of India, British East India Company, East India Company was abolished, and all the powers were transferred, powers with respect to government, territories, revenues, all these went to the crown. So this was the consequences of the uh, revolt of 1857. And what is the reason for the failure of revolt? What is the reason for the failure of revolt? The reason for the failure of revolt is, first thing, poor coordination. Second thing, lack of coordination, because each one was fighting for their own what you call agenda. No, there was no common what you call thought. And rebels, they had their own grievances. They did not come under one umbrella. And moreover, if they tried to capture a place, they were not able to sustain the siege. And moreover, they lacked resources when compared to the English. And English had better resources because they had the modern what you call the communication systems, and they had modern weapons, and moreover they had materials of war. And one among the important reason for the failure is the invention of telegraph services in India. It played a very decisive role in controlling this what we call the revolt of 1857, because the British commander in chief, who is responsible for the army and intelligence, everything, commander in chief in India, he got live updates and he was well informed. He was well informed about the movement of Indian rebels. And another important what we called the failure for this revolt is the fidelity of Indian native princes to the British, and failure of mass participation pan India. And educated class did not participate. Another reason. So these were the reasons for the failure of revolt. What is the nature of revolt? See, the nature of revolt, the opinions, Vinayak Damodar Savakar, the, he is a right-wing, what you call the nationalist. So he, in his opinion, the revolt of 1857, he calls it the first war of Indian independence. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he remarks that this 1857 revolt is a feudal outburst. Then Sir John Seeley, Sir John Seeley, so he says that this revolt of 1857 is wholly unpatriotic, wholly unpatriotic, selfish nature of the selfish nature of sepoys with no unified native leadership and without popular support. This is the words of Sir John Seeley. L.E.S. Rice, L.E.S. Rice, he says this 1857 is a war of fanatic regionalist, fanatic religionists against Christians. This is L.E.S. Subhash Chandra Bose, he says that the revolt of 1857 is not, it is not a merely a sepoy mutiny, but it is a national uprising. And T.R. Holmes, T.R. Holmes, he also famously remarks that this revolt of 1857 is a conflict between, it is a conflict between civilizations and barbarism. Barbarism. Outram and Taylor, they famously remarked that this revolt of 1857 is a conspiracy of Hindu Muslims. It's a Hindu Muslim conspiracy. Bipin Chandra, famous Indian historian, Bipin Chandra, he says this revolt of 1857 entirely, this movement, entire movement lacked a unified and forward-looking program to be implemented after capturing power. To be implemented after capturing power. And Surendranath Sen, S.N. Sen, he says that this revolt of 87, what it began, a fight for religion ended as War of Independence. What a fight for religion ended as War of Independence. And another famous historian, Benjamin Disraeli, he was also the what he called the British Prime Minister. So he remarked that Disraeli, he remarked that this revolt of 1857 is is it a sepoy mutiny or it is a national revolt? He questioned it whether it is a sepoy mutiny or a national revolt. And Dr. R.C. Majumdar, these are the different select opinions of the nature of the revolt of 1857. R.C. Majumdar, he famously remarked about the 1857. He said the so-called First War of Independence of 1857 is neither national nor War of Independence. This is the famous remark of R.C. Majumdar. It is neither a national nor a war of independence. Yes, Mubashira, you have any doubts? Okay, so the revolt of 1857, it had lot of grievances. And this law, the grievances, you can see that we can categorize into what we call many segments. The audience were the common man, but who were the persons who were aggrieved? So the first people who were aggrieved is the peasants. The second one is the zamindars. The third one is the artisans and people who are involved in the handicraft industry. And the other grievance is from the traders. And there were grievances from the tribals. Sepoys who were there in the British Army had their grievances. Native Indian states, they had their grievances. The religious groups, they had their own grievances. So we are going to look just one by one quickly. See, this is the map of the India political map, and you can see that various presidencies were there during this 1857 revolt, and each had different agenda, and mostly the Madras presidency, Bombay presidency, and some parts of the eastern and central India, they never participated. And this whole revolt was 1857. And the first among them who had what you called grievances prior to this 1857 revolt, which culminated into revolt, is the peasants. See, as you know that this land revenue policy, which started by permanent settlement, Rayatwari settlement, Mahalwari, and this Zamindaris. So they had what they call the extraction of revenue to the maximum possible extent. And because of this revenue policy, the landlords, the zamindars, they started tormenting the poor peasants, farmers. And this, what they called change in agricultural policies and also the revenue policy brought in disguised employment. And moreover, this change in the traditional practices of agriculture to commercialization started this cultivation of indigo on a large scale, and that too in a private planters and with inhuman cultivations. This change in this revenue and moreover, and the farmers were not able to produce, and also they were not in a position to eat. So the Britishers started this policy that everything the peasant has to depend, even for the seeds. Today, the same thing is happening. The farmers, they don't have any seeds in their hands. It is in the hands of big multinational companies. The same thing happened nearly 150, 160 years ago. That farmers, peasants were in the hands in the mercy of the landlords. And moreover, their hard work, which they put for 12 to 18 hours of work, the wages were very low for the produce. And moreover, the tax which was imposed on them was very, very high. And it was said that 89% of the revenue which was extracted by the Zamindar went to the British, and 11% only was with the Zamindar. And moreover, the Zamindar started to, he could not maintain this 11%. He started to extract more and more from the peasant, and these peasants were not able to what we call produce because they didn't have the money. So this money they have to borrow from the money lenders. So new class of money lenders came in. So they were caught between the British government on one side and its ally, the Zamindar, and on the other side you have the money lender. So the peasants did not have any what we call an opportunity to reap the harvest and eat for himself or keep some part of the money as a saving. So everything was extracted, and the peasant farmer was reduced to the level of poverty, and this brought in this what we call this land revenue policy, the agricultural policy, the political policy, everything led to the constant droughts. And even if there were good rains, they were not able to channelize the water or bring any good irrigation or dams. So this continuous drought and flood led to the famines, artificially made famines by the British. So this brought a death knell for the peasants. So their grievance was with the zamindars, because the zamindars they had this what we called this traditional relationship with the peasant, that they will be providing everything and peasant has to work. And because of this Permanent Settlement Act of 1773, the peasants lost the right of their land, and the zamindar, who used to be an ordinary tax collector, he became the new landlord. And once he became, the British started to extract more and more revenue. Even the zamindars were dissolution, and they were not able to pay the huge amount which was demanded by the British. So this brought ruin of all old zamindars, and British started to auction their lands and their right of revenue. And moreover, this auctioning, new group of people, new wealthy merchants or Indian merchants, wealthy merchants, then this money lenders and other officials, Indian officials, they started buying these auction lands and they became the new landlords and zamindars, new class of zamindars. And moreover, there's a the what we called the sunset rule was brought in. See, the sunset rule is uh, in each place, in different areas, the sunset rule differs. If you see in Assam, and you can see at 4 a.m. there's a bright sun, and by what we call by 4 p.m. there's a sunset. But this rule was not followed properly, and the British were brought in that they had their own timings and they extended what we call the work hours. So this what we call had an impact on the agriculture. The zamindars were not able to cope up with this sunset rule, and moreover, the uh, when zamindars were eliminated, new class of landlords came in. They were what we call not understanding the complex relationship between the zamindar and the peasant. So they started extracting and they put the peasants in a very uncomfortable situation. So this brought the wrath, anger of the peasants on the new landlords, and this policy shifting of what we call the power from the zamindar to the new landlords changed the course of uh, the peasant landlord relationship, and the peasants were reduced to poverty, and this also led to artificial famines. And moreover, as you know that during the Emperor Aurangzeb's era, India had a favorable balance of trade, and nearly 25% of the world's economy, GDP, was India. And the traditional artisans, craftsmen, all enjoyed the what we called the fruits of the labor, and their artifacts, the crafts, whatever they produced, manufactured, was traded, and it was these goods were exported to world countries, and India got lot of revenue, and balance of trade was in favor of India. And moreover, this traditional economy, the Britishers, they started to destroy. So we will be seeing the economic policies from 1600 to 1757. What is the policy? And from 1757 to 1813, and from 1813 to 1857, and from 1857 onwards till Government of India Act 1935. What is the economic policy as well as what is the political policy? We'll be looking in the coming slides. So the traditional economy, Britishers, they started in 1600 as a trading company, and slowly they started to establish their factories. And once they started, they saw the Indian weakness, and from a position they of a subordinate, they started to what we call come to an equality. And the 1757 Battle of Plassey and this Battle of Buxar and this two treaties of Robert Clive, with Treaty of Allahabad one with the Awadh Nawab, and Treaty of uh, uh, Allahabad the second with the Mughal Emperor, changed the course of the entire history, where the traditional economy changed from the peasant-led economy to colonial economy. So the British started to extract more and more, and they were different from the other invaders who came to India, like whether it is the Greeks or Persians or Mughals. They came and they settled in India. They became part of India, and whatever they produced, everything was they owned it. So there was no loss of revenue. But this colonial economy is entirely different because Britishers did not come here to settle. Everything they plundered, whatever they did, everything they did for the crown and maximum profit, and they were never looking at the state of economy for the Indians. And moreover, whatever raw materials they procured from India, they brought as finished goods, and this finished goods was brought in without any duties at a very lesser rate, and they started to what we called sell those finished machine-made goods in India in competition with handmade what we call weavers. So this totally destroyed the entire revenue for the artisans, craftsmen, weavers. And moreover, the British policy, trade policy, economic policy changed, and they implemented more into the railways and other innovations. And everything what they had brought in was to plunder India, not for the benefit of Indians. And moreover, whatever the goods produced by the craftsmen, they had the patronage by the local native states. And moreover, local people used to purchase because they had the purchasing power. But now these native states all became slaves of British through the SAS policy. And once this subsidy alliance policy was implemented, and also the aggressive policy of Lord Dalhousie, with doctrine of lapse and also usurping the land through what you call misgovernment, the patronage of these artisans were lost. And moreover, the Indians were forced to do agriculture. They were forced to cultivate tea, indigo, cotton, and other oil seeds. And all these things, agriculture was everything for the food producing, everything was for the British. And the farmers, peasants, and those who were dependent on this agriculture could not get the raw materials or patronage and even food, so they were reduced to the level of poverty. And moreover, this era of change in government from the Mughals to the British, this extinction of art and culture takes place, and there was a stagnation in the Indian art and culture during this 200 years of rule of the colonial Britishers. And moreover, there are grievances among the traders because the Indian economy had a favorable, what we call balance of trade towards the Indian merchants. Once the 1757 Battle of Plassey changed the course of event, it changed the nature of Indian economy to the colonial economy. And the trade policy of British that we will see in the economic policies changed, where high export duty was put on Indian finished goods when they were sending from India to the other countries. And moreover, the Britishers, they did not pay any tax for their goods brought in. So this, what we call the favorable balance of trade towards the British, it eliminated the entire what we call the Indian merchant class and traders, and India became a place for only source of raw material. No production, no development, or no manufacturing took place. India became what we call a place where raw material was grown and it was sourced to the London, and there was no modern industrial development. All the raw materials, everything which they took from India, it what we call infused industrial revolution in England, and moreover, this ruined the self-sufficient rural economy which existed prior to the British administration took over of the power from Mughals. And there were grievances from the tribals. As you know that once the British started acquiring more territories, they started to interfere with the forest dwellers. They brought more and more what we call laws that the those who were in the forest, they could not enjoy the independence what they had. All these tribals, they lost their land and also their traditional homes and also their what we call sustenance which forest had provided them. So this loss of habitat, loss of their livelihood, loss of their food, what we call the food forest, everything culminated into a direct confrontation between the tribals and the British. And there were grievances under these sepoys. As you know that 1820, the military reforms which the British brought in after after they captured the powers of Marathas and also the Sikhs, and they captured whole of India. They started with this reforms which were brought in 1820s. They brought uniform and also they brought in what we call the promotion of lower caste people, and they brought in what we call rules which do not respect the Indian tradition. That is, whether they are wearing turban or whether wearing tilak or whether they're wearing the bangle, and all those things they did not respect. And moreover, they started to make everybody wear uniform. And moreover, the Muslims they cannot keep their beard, and also the Hindus they cannot keep their what we call long hairs. So all these issues brought in disregard to the Indian religious, Islamic, and the Hindu religious values. And moreover, there were very few promotion of opportunities because Indians were prohibited from holding higher positions, and they were given only restricted positions, and that too those previously the higher caste Brahmins who were enjoying high position, high position in what you call in the army, so they were not given the prominent. And moreover, this low grade treatment, which the higher caste people also meted at the hands of British, also brought what they call ill will towards the British army. And moreover, this general service rule establishment, which came in, also brought a death knell for the dominance of the higher castes. And they brought in a lot of rules which the sepoys cannot get their bata, or they were forced to travel outside the Indian mainland and cross the seas, which against the what we called the tradition that Indians will not cross seas. And the issue of greased cartridges, where Enfield cartridges, there was a rumor that it had been greased with the fat of cow and pigs, which went against the religious, uh, what they called precepts of Hindus and Muslims. So this also brought a lot of resentment among the Indian sepoys. The culmination of all these things it will happen when Dalhousie annexed the Awadh on the pretext of misgovernment, and because of his territorial aggrandism attitude, brought in this what we call a lot of ill will towards the British army. At this cost, but this is also one among the reason for the uprising of the sepoys against the British. So they were, as I told you, there were grievances among the religious groups. The religious groups had grievances because the Brahmins and other high caste people, they had a suspicion on the advent of the Christian missionaries, especially the Protestant missionaries who came after the 1850. There was a law which was brought in, which what we call supported the Anglican Protestant missionaries to come to India for their mission work. And these Christian missionaries started what we called schools, colleges. They started what we called educating the girls, and moreover, they started the education of the lower caste. So this enraged the religious people because only the upper caste and the ruling class were getting education through Gurukulam. Now this Gurukulam system was not respected, and the Macaulay's English education was implemented. All these things were against the religious beliefs and the customs which was there in the ancient India. So this advent of Christian missionaries was not welcomed by the religious groups. And moreover, this British administration, they started meddling with the Indian, what we call traditions. This abolition of sati, abolition of child marriage, and all these social, what we called legislations created a disharmony. So this issue of meddling with the religious affairs also brought in the religious groups in conflict with the British. And moreover, British started mixing various castes in the army. So this created a lot of resentment because upper caste had a dominance. What was there in the village, the same thing was brought into the army, the same caste. And a lower caste person cannot be posted, or he cannot be elevated, or he cannot be given promotion higher than an upper caste. Only an upper caste person will be getting all the privileges in the army. when Britishers started to mix different types of caste of lower level and started to make politics and promoted only the lower caste people, the upper caste Brahmins who were in the army revolted against the British. And this revolt culminated in the uprising of 1857. So uh, now we are coming, we have seen what were the grievances. Now we have come to the economic policies of the British. So as you see that the Britishers in 1600s, they came as traders to India. And once they came as a trading company, their agenda was that they wanted to trade with the Indians and they wanted to take the goods and make huge profit in their homeland. And this trading, what you called with the Indians and the Indian mainland, it was carried at in a position of subordinate position. They were because they were not ruling class at that time, and whatever they had to come submit. They had to present their credentials to the then ruling Mughals, and moreover, anything that they want to do, they need to get permission. So from 1600 onwards till the Battle of Plassey, the 1757, till the Battle of Plassey, the company they followed the what we call the role of a trading corporation, and this trading corporation they were involved in buying goods or precious metals and they exchanged they brought these precious metals from England and they exchanged with the Indian goods like cotton textiles and other spices and other materials which they couldn't get. So India was getting lot of revenue because the gold which was there in England was used to purchase. So currency or the what we call precious metal, gold and other precious metal came into India. So India had what we call favorable trade. And after the 1757, the Battle of Plassey, the British East India Company's relations, it underwent a qualitative change. And this qualitative change was used by the company to politically control and push its Indian trade. So this 1757 onwards, it started the first the phase is that the phase of mercantilism, the phase of mercantilism, where suppressed surplus Indian revenues were used to buy Indian goods, finished goods, and it was exported to England. As you know that the economic policies which was followed by the British, it led to transformation of the Indian economy into a from Indian the economy it became colonial economy. There's a fundamental change in Indian economy. India had a favorable balance of trade, that is before 1757. But after 1757, this whole economy changed into colonial economy. And moreover, the structure and the nature of the British economy, it was the Indian economy, the structure and nature of Indian economy, it was the economy, it was determined by the needs of the British economy. So there's a change in the economic structure where the Indian economy underwent a what we call a change, where the structure and the nature of its economy changed, and it was determined by the needs of the British economy. So British people's needs determined the Indian economy. And this phase of mercantilism, what we called the peasants, the artisans, craftsmen, traders, they had what we called led existence with a self-sufficient rural economy before the change in the economy and the administration by the British. So this peasant, artisans, craftsmen, traders, they their basic economic pattern was disturbed, and it was perpetuated by the British, and they made them bleed. They changed their nature. And moreover, this change of rulers in prior to the coming of the British, if the change of rulers, there was not change in any position of the trader. But whereas the British colonialism is very different with respect to the change, where the rulers who came did not settle, unlike the earlier rulers, like Mughals, they did not integrate with the Indian society. So the Britishers started plundering more and more. And moreover, the economy depended according to the needs of the British people. So this qualitative change which happened changed the entire course. And the first phase started from 1757 to 1813, and they call us the phase of mercantilism. And during this time, where you have this Treaty of Allahabad 1 and 2 in 1765, the 1765 to 1813, the political policy, what was there was policy of ring fence, that is the buffer state happened. Here I am putting a comparison: political policy, economic policy. See, from 1600 to 1757, the policy of British was trading company. Trading company, and they had what he called trying to come from a subordinate position to equality struggle. This was the struggle of the British East India Company, struggle of British East India Company from a subordinate position to equality. And this position here, this economic policy from 1600 to 1757 was what we called, it was only trading goods, and India had a favorable balance of trade because precious metals came into India from England to India to trade. The second political policy, this political policy will look in detail. The second political policy is from 1757, particularly from 1765, after this Treaty of Allahabad, from 1813 till Charter Act of 1813, you have this political policy is the policy of ring fence. Whereas the economic policy, which followed from 1757 to 1813, it is the policy, it is a phase of mercantilism. From 1813 to 1857, the British followed the policy of subordinate isolation. The economic policy, what the Britishers started is from 1813, Charter Act of 1813 till this Government of India Act 1858. You have this phase of free trade. In this free trade, you have that India was converted. India was converted from what you called a place where finished goods, artifacts, crafts were sent to England. Now India was converted to be a place where it became source of raw material. And second thing, India became a market for the British finished goods which came from England in this free trade. And the fourth phase, which started is from the what we called 1858 onwards till 1935. We have this uh, the policy of political policy of subordinate union. You must be wondering, what do you mean by subordinate? The subordinate means lower in position. You're inferior, lower in position. You're under a authority, superior authority, under a superior authority, and you should be submissive, and moreover you should be dependent. This is the meaning of subordinate. So in the political policy, first phase, Britishers were subordinate to the Mughals. They were lower in position. They were under a superior authority called Mughals. They had to submit their credentials, everything to the Mughal emperor, and they were dependent on the mood and the what we call the grants that what the emperor gives. But from second phase, you can see that they started this policy of buffer state called ring fence. And from 1813, the Charter Act of 1813 onwards, they started till 1857, till the revolt of 1857. They started this policy of subordinate isolation. They isolated every native kingdoms, and native kingdoms became subordinate to the Britishers. This is the policy of subordinate isolation. And moreover, finally, after the revolt of 1857, the political policy changed. They were Indians are subordinate, but they brought in into the union of the British. So the political policy changed. And the economic policy from 1600 to 1757, they were trading company. India had a favorable balance of trade. But after the Battle of Plassey, they started the phase of mercantilism where the revenues, whatever Indians were paying to the British, all these surplus revenues, Britishers started to buy the revenue goods from Indians using the profit which they earned, and the same thing they brought the finished goods and they made Indians to buy. So this phase of mercantilism where Indian revenues, Indian people money was used to buy the finished goods, Indian finished goods, and this goods were exported to England. And moreover, whatever the goods which were brought from England, they were selling it to Indians on a very higher rate. So the phase of 1813 to 1858, after Charter Act, till the British took over, they started the phase of free trade where India was converted, where a place which had to source raw materials to England, and India became a market for the British goods. And the fourth economic, what they call the phase, from 1858 till you can say 1947, the economic phase, the Britishers they started controlling what they call all the capital, British capital, which was brought in. They started controlling it using British established banks. British capitalists they started using banks as an instrument, and moreover, many foreign trading firms had come to India, foreign trading firms. All these they started what they called to start to manage the Indian agency. So this phase of 1858 is the phase of what they called finance imperialism or financial imperialism. Everything what they did, everything only the British will benefit, whether posts or telegraphs or uh, telephone or railways, whatever invention they did or constructed, everything is only for the benefit of the British, not for the common man or common Indians. So this changed the whole policy of the British, this economic policy. Are you clear, Aritra? Muhammad Ashraf? Ramasandiran? Okay. Now, please wait. I will send you the notes. I want to send everything, whatever I've done. So I'm preparing. I'll send it to you. Okay. So in that, I'll give a little more information. So the Indian, what they call, we are coming to the revenue collection system. So as you know that when Britishers came there, they started this revenue system, and they wanted to make more and more money because they have not come here to settle here. They had come to rule, and they were whatever they wanted for the honor of the British crown. So their revenue policy changed after controlling most parts of India through this what we call buffer state and the political policy. They started controlling most parts of India. And once they started to control, they started changing the nature. of the Indian economy to colonial economy. And various methods of land revenue conditions were followed depending on the local conditions. And this earlier collections were mostly in the form of what we call revenue farming. Revenue farming. And this revenue farming, gradually, the Britishers, they started understanding the Indians' mentality, and moreover, the British acquired they acquired the knowledge of Indian revenue system. They acquired the knowledge. Once they acquired the knowledge, they started to devise long-term plans. So long-term plans were drawn by the British so that they can trade, they can get more and more revenue, and all these revenues will be what we called will be collected in a very systematic manner in different regions. And the main aim of the British was to increase the tax collections. The main aim for the British was to increase the tax collections, and they had very little concern for the farmers or peasants, and they had very little concern for the practices, age-old practices and traditions. So Britishers did not want anything else but only revenue, only tax. So they did not respect. So there were three main settlements which they started. Firstly, they started the permanent settlement, and this permanent settlement or zamindari. This permanent settlement is the first among revenue settlement, and this permanent settlement came and was implemented firstly in the province, the biggest province in India, in Bengal, in 1793. And this permanent settlement act is called also called as zamindari system. And Lord Cornwallis, and he was very prudent, and he was also very cunning. So he brought in this administrative measure, which was permanent land revenue settlement of Bengal in 1793. And this was implemented in the various regions of the Bengal province: East Bengal, West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand, uh, uh, Odisha, and some parts of Assam. So this what we called uh, settlement act permanent. So they recognized the tax collectors, the as what we call the owners of the land as zameen holders. So this new class or new owners of the land was recognized, and the peasants, farmers lost their land, farmers lost, and new group of what they called class of people, zamindars, were recognized as owners of the land, and they had to pay a revenue to the British East India Company regularly. And this Permanent Settlement Act was the idea of Sir John Shore, who later became the Governor General, and they implemented in the eastern part of India, the richest province, and zamindars became landlords and agents. And here, the tenant, who was the peasant, who was the cultivator, he became the tenant, and he lost nearly 60% of whatever land holdings, everything it went to the zamindars. Only 40% was left with the what we call with the poor peasants, and that also will be taken over by the successive what we call the revenue systems. And moreover, according to this, what he called the permanent settlement, this Britishers, the company, they fixed the annual rate of taxation was fixed, and accordingly, agreement will be made that this fixed revenue for any cause or circumstances, it will not be revised. So in other words, East India Company, they brought in the permanent plundering of Indian revenue, that whatever the zamindari used to extract from the poor peasants, 89% went to British East India Company. Only 11% of the revenue was left with the zamindar, and this zamindar had to what he called manage all the affairs. They had to pay some amount to the peasants, and he had to what he called maintain everything, which was not enough. So this class of zamindars were compelled by the British to what he called extract more and more what he called from the peasants, and the riots, the poor peasants, they became tenants. And since they were the tillers of the land, Zamindar is just a tax collector. He cannot go and do the agricultural activities because he does not have the basic knowledge of agriculture. His only duty is to extract more and more. So the Zamindars, what you call existence through this Permanent Settlement Act, brought a class of wealthy people, privileged class, and they owed their existence to the British only. And Britishers brought in because for their own good, not for the sake of people. And this, what we called zamindars, had their own interests. They were also very much interested to gain from this, what we called position as a landlord. But ultimately, they also got disillusioned by the British attitude. So this Permanent Settlement Act, which was implemented, had arbitrary fixation. There is no what we call negotiation. Whatever the British government fixed, that is the final. And it was implemented in the erstwhile the province of Bengal after the Battle of Plassey. So in 1793. So later on, this was implemented in the eastern Uttar Pradesh, especially in the area of Banaras, and also in south, it north of Madras, all the areas which is north of Madras province, all these areas, this permanent settlement, zamindari, was implemented. And moreover, this land revenue, it did not have any what we called scientific basis. And this revenue was arbitrary, ad hoc, without consultation. And moreover, there was a what he called a traditional uh, relationship was there, which was between the peasants and the tax collectors who became zamindars. This relationship was abolished. They arbitrarily annulled the relationship, and moreover, this burden of land revenue, which became very, very high because of the arbitrary fixation, was passed on to the peasant. And later on, the zamindars also started feeling the heat because British did not let them collect peacefully. They started to extract more and more. Then zamindars also faced problems. And those zamindars who defaulted, their lands were confiscated because of non-payment of revenue, and this lands were auctioned. This lands were auctioned, and this auctioned lands, this auctioned lands were bought by a new class of people who were what we call wealthy merchants, landlords, and other officials in the British. They started buying this auction lands. So this money lenders and urban-based merchants and other speculators who were there, they usurped this land through what we called through this auctioning, and now this peasants had to deal with the new type of landlords because earlier Jamindar they had some kind of a traditional relationship, but new landlords, these money lenders, speculators, wealthy merchants, they never cared for the welfare of the peasants, and moreover, this new landlords they never had any permanent interest in developing this land. Only thing they wanted that what we called Jamindar, that title. So they were not concerned about the poor peasantry. And moreover, because of this kind of inhuman, what we call the policies, the because of this, many peasant uprisings took place, and the prominent among them was in 1795. There was a tribal uprising in excuse me, in 1795 there was uprising in Panchat, and moreover in 1798 in Chhattisgarh region in Raipur, the tribals, the peasants, they revolted. In 1799 in the Odisha in Balashore, the revolt took place. And moreover, from 1799 to 1800, in the Bengal, especially in the villages which is in and around Midnapur, there was lot of resentment among the peasant uprising, and peasants they fought against this inhuman and injustice which was meted out to them. Bengal province, which was known as the granary of the East, Bengal province was known as the granary or food basket of the East, granary of the East became barren because of the policies, economic policies of this British. And once this became barren, there were and and this led to a lot of poverty. Once poverty came in, you have this disease, death, drought, and famines. All these, once a very glorious province, was reduced to hunger and poverty with the disease and death. I think this is enough for the permanent settlement. We can go to the next settlement act, the riot warring. See, this riot warring system, riot means farmer. Riot means farmer or peasant. Earlier, the British, after this uprisings which they got in the Bengal province, Thomas Munro and Reed, they started this idea that why don't we, British government, directly engage with the farmers, and we will eliminate this zamindari, and we also, why we need to leave this 11 percentage to this zamindar, 100% we will get. That is 89% land we will only will get. So this was the idea of the British. So the Reed and Monroe, they devised this plan of Rayatwari system. In Rayatwari system, this was mainly introduced in the South and Western India, especially in the places of Madras Presidency, Madras. In the Western India, you have in Central India, South Central India, you have Berar province, and in Bombay, in parts of Assam. So Thomas Monroe, he introduced this policy, tested it first in Madras. Thomas Monroe, he tested this Rayatwari system, and later it was taken to the other areas. Under this Rayatwari system, the absence of zamindars is the main thing. Zamindaris were eliminated. The peasants were recognized as proprietor of land, as the cultivator. The cultivator peasants were recognized as proprietor of land, owners of the land. And moreover, there was no intermediary between peasant and government. So zamindars were abolished. And moreover, the land revenue, which was fixed, and this fixation was for 20 years to 40 years at a time. Earlier, it was for n number of years. And now the cultivator or the farmer had to pay tax directly as the owner of the land to the British. And this was not permanent, it can be revised. And the riots, though they got the what we call the title of land, this ownership of land was, however, negated by three factors. There were three factors which negated this ownership. First one was that though the peasant got the land revenue, but this land revenue was exorbitant. It was exorbitant. Second thing, the factor was that the government right to enhance land revenue at will. Government can increase the land revenue at its will. And third factor which negated this, what we called this Rayatwari system is that the riot had to pay the revenue to the British government, even though when his crops was destroyed due to famine, droughts or floods, he had to pay revenue. There is no other choice. So though the what we call the riot became the owner of the land, his condition did not improve. It further what we call deteriorated. And the other thing what this new revenue system brought is that fourth thing is that the pasture land, what we call the pasture land or wasteland, which in ancient India, every four villages will have a common land. This is for the grazing and for other purpose, and certain land will be waste, which they have not what they call use that land for any other purpose. So it's a waste land. It will be common for all. So these lands now, which belong to the village communities, and villages had, and they were pasture because they were using this land for their feeding of their for their own what you call livestock, cattle, everything. Now government started to what you called appropriate. They took away from the villages the village control, and directly the this pasture land was taken by the British. So the tenant had to lose even the wasteland which was there for their cattle. They had to lose. And this way, the burden of revenue increased many folds. Burden of revenue increased many folds. Though the cultivator was the owner, it had to pay huge exorbitant. And moreover, the only thing is that the change in administration. Now the riot became the owner of the land. So I think this is enough for the revenue collection for the riot wari system. The next system is the Mahal Wari system. And this Mahal Wari system was introduced in the year 1833 onwards. And mostly this Mahalbari system was introduced in North India and Central India and certain parts of Northwestern India. So it mainly Mahalbari system was introduced in the fertile doab regions of Punjab, central provinces, and certain parts of northwestern province. And this Mahalbari system was also applied in the northern in United Provinces, especially in the Awadh region. In the Awadh region, and moreover, the settlement under the system, the basic unit of revenue settlement was mahal or village. And this settlement was done as a whole village, not with any individual riot. And this village lands, whatever was, it was belonged to the village community. And this village community had, so the entirely the village will be measured. And this measuring was not done on what we call scientific basis. See, in a village, there will be certain lands which may not be having proper irrigation facility. It may not have any what we call the fertility of the soil, and moreover, the terrain will be different. It will be rocky. It may not have what we call proper. So, but what the British will do is that they will make a settlement for the whole village without considering anything. So the village community, what we called, had to pay. They were responsible for paying all the taxes, and this revenue was collected by the village headman, and this village headman became Mirasadar later. Mirasadar later. So this Mirasadar used to collect the land revenue and give it to the British. But though this what we called village was measured during the timing of fixation of the revenue, it did not what we called get into account when there was a drought, when there was what we called floods, and all these things were not taken. So when the entire floods came destroyed, still the village people had to contribute. But one good thing happened during this Mahalbari is that the village community, when they came as a collective farming, this improved the irrigation facility. This improved the irrigation facility for an extent, but all the benefits was enjoyed by the British in Mahalwari. Though they eliminated the middleman, the village became what we call collective. Here, the village man used to extract from the poor, what we call small landholding farmer. Though when there is a drought or floods, and the Britishers were given the opportunity to it can be revised periodically, unlike the Permanent Settlement Act. So we will go to uh, the before this going to the what we call the political policies. We can know what is the uh, the trade policy and the agricultural policy. So, so the Britishers, when they started, this is the commercialization of agriculture. The Britishers, they changed the nature of Indian economy and also the change of the traditional practices in the agriculture. And once the 1857 revolt took place, sorry, the 1757 Battle of Plassey took place, the Britishers they started what they called changing the agricultural pattern of India, and at the same time, in England, industrial revolution started happening. England industrial once industrial revolution started, the raw material input had to come, and all these input came from India. So the raw materials, what was there, all went to the industrial revolution, which was caused by the Aritra. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this raw materials was what we called sent, and there were more and more demand because of the industrial revolution that started happening parallelly in England. As a result of this industrial revolution, commercialization of Indian agriculture began. So Indian agriculture started to feed the British industries. Once these what we called they started, and moreover this the exploitation of Indian agriculture was done is also in an act. It's a balancing. It's also aimed at the balancing act of the British with respect to the Chinese trade with company. So they wanted to balance this one. So they had done this commercialization of Indian agriculture. Moreover, the Britishers stopped Indians from cultivating crops, food crops for their own use and for the general public. They changed and they forced Indian cultivators to cultivate commercial crops like jute, cotton, opium, indigo, and other things in a large scale. So this change in pattern, what happened? The policy, it benefited the British, and moreover, the British planters exploited the Indians, and moreover, the traders, that British traders, they benefited a lot. They gained a lot, is profitable in the trade and manufacturers. But Indian merchants, Indian traders, they were suffered a huge what they call loss. Indians suffered huge losses. And moreover, this change in agriculture, that commercialization of agriculture, they went into their reduction or almost stopped producing food crops. So once food crops was stopped, this led to the what you call problem of feeding the population. Feeding the population, Britishers were not interested in feeding the population. And as a result, artificial artificial, man created famine started happening. People were dying, hunger, disease came in. And moreover, the peasants and artisans they produced, they were forced to sell their products. They need to sell their products, sale of products in a very, very low prices started, and moreover the peasants started, and moreover the people started to depend more on the middlemen merchants, and this led to this famine. Once it came, people started going to money lenders and borrowing money, and this led to rural indebtedness. And also this led to the destruction of craft tradition, art and craft industries, artifacts, everything was destroyed, and phase of stagnation came in, and farmers were forced to sign contracts with the traders and the planters, and this contracts were made only in the interest of the British, not in the interest of the farmer. And once a very what you call self-sufficient Indian economy, which had favorable balance of trade in with the Mughals, now totally this balance of trade destroyed, and villages suffered. So the commercialization of agriculture, which started from 1757, had its impact on the Indians. Now, the trade policy. See, the British trade policy was guided by the need of British industries. You have seen that the trade policy, where what we call from 1757 onwards till what we called 1813, it became a phase of mercantilism, where the raw materials from India was shipped to England as a as a what we called source for the industries, and moreover they started imposing huge tariffs on what we call huge tariffs on Indian goods, Indian produced goods, if it is what we called exported to foreign countries. In this way, the Britishers prevented that Indian goods should not go out of India, and moreover, India became a land for the finished British goods, and India became a market for the finished goods. So this time, this industrialization in the British brought in machine made machine made cheap goods. So once it brought cheap goods, naturally Indian handmade, finest handmade art weavers and other things could not compete because of the input cost. Because Britishers were what they called, they were controlling the agriculture, and these weavers had to buy the what we call raw materials from the British only, and they had to pay a huge amount for that, and the Britishers made profit. Second thing, when these viewers go and make a finished product, and this finished product, they were putting huge taxes, and such a way that in two ways, in raw material procurement and in finished goods, the viewers lost in competition with this machine-made goods which came from England. And this declined this Indian art and craft industry, and the law, and moreover, when the Britishers encircled India, all these native kingdoms became what they called submissive to the British paramount power. Their patronage among Indian rulers was lost. And finally, the Indians lacked any technological advancements, because everything was in England, and British was not bringing a technology. and they were compelled. The Indians were compelled only for what he called only for raw materials, and this, in a nutshell, if I want to say, Indian industries systematically destroyed. Indian industries were systematically destroyed. So once this what we call they destroyed, British started developing what we call railways and other technological. And these railways and other technological advancement they brought in was brought only to carry away the British goods to nook and corner of India, British goods to corner of India, and also carry away all the raw materials to England. So large number of artisans, craftsmen, and even peasants and traders all became unemployed. And as a result of unemployment, poverty came in. Poverty came in, money lending came in. Money lending came in. There was a lot of what we called distress, and agriculture became overburdened because of the change in the nature of the trade policy and commercialization of agriculture. Once the self-sufficient Indian industry, Indian village was what you called was totally pierced and it bled. It pierced and it bled, and India became from a position of self-sufficiency, from a position of net what you call the exporter. From net exporter, India became to the position of net importer. So this change in the trade, the agricultural policies, India started to lose. And this brings the change in after this 1858 Government of India takeover, Government of India Act, which changed the what we call the administration. This drain of wealth took place. And this drain of wealth from India, all the wealth went into England. And England, how did they do? So India did not get any what we call adequate economic what we call benefits or commercial or material benefits, whereas all the benefits, all the raw materials, everything British, they converted all the Indian revenues into bullion or gold bars, and they what you call from gold bars they started shipping it to England, everything, and they plundered everything. That is how this drain of wealth took place. So how this what you call the Britishers did this drain of wealth. So the British economy started what we call extracting more and more from Indian economy and made it as a colonial economy. The manufacturing sector and the rising capitalist class in England, they what we called started making Indians to grow only the crops for their industries, and there were no material or any economic benefits for the Indians. And moreover, the Britishers started implementing after 1858 that Indians have to pay money for their own administration. So they had to pay something called cost of maintaining the Britishers in India. Indians have to pay for it. So they brought something called home charges. So home charges, the cost of maintaining the British India office in London for India, for the administration of India, as well as this home office in London, Indians have to pay. And moreover, the cost incurred by the Secretary of State, the cost incurred by Secretary of State prior to Secretary of State prior to 1857, the amount was around 10 to 12% of the whatever average revenue which was there in India. But after 1857, the revenue or the cost of the Secretary of State increased twofold. 25% of the revenue was taken as the cost for maintaining the Secretary of State alone. And remittances. Remittance means any foreign money coming into Indians. And these remittances, whatever they did, the Britishers, they started expenditure on British officials working in India, whatever the salaries and pension, everything which remittances which occurred, it was borne by the Indians. So the remittances means charges which was occurred for the maintaining this British officials, army, their salaries, their pensions, all these were called remittances. So everything India has to bear, whether salary or pension, all the British officials. Moreover, the foreign trade, with respect to foreign trade, the Indians had to pay what we call interest to the British capital, and moreover, they should India should pay interest to the British capital. Pay interest, whatever interest or amount which was invested in India by the British capitalists, Indians have to pay that interest in their for their revenue, and moreover, tax holidays had to be given to the British capitalists and investors. And finally, the investments which were brought in India, the investments, the what you call the Indian products were brought with Indian money and it sold. So the Indian produced a product and this product was bought by the British using Indian money, and this product which they shipped to international markets, the Britishers what you called sold this, and they made a huge profits, due to this what you called the drain of wealth. Due to this drain of wealth, India bled white. There was a plunder of India's wealth. Due to this, India bled white, plunder of Indian wealth from India to England. And the capital formation in India remained only minimal. Capital formation was very much minimal in India. And moreover, there was lack of any investments for innovation. Lack of investment for innovation. So this brought down the productivity and growth rate of India. Productivity and growth rate. So this this drain of wealth. And moreover, India lacked industries. This drain of wealth affected the prospects of educated youth, and it had affected the employment opportunities of Indians. And this brought lot of poverty, and poverty led to artificial famines because people did not have money to buy grains to eat, and people had disease and their death. This drain was mainly out of what we called mainly the drain of land is due to the land revenue, and this led to the what we call impoverishment of farmers or peasants. And this drain of wealth, what we called, opened the eyes of Indians, and Dadabi Naroji fiercely put this in the British public, and the Indians resented the colonial oppression and exploitation, and this drain of wealth led to the growth of national consciousness. And once national consciousness, what we called, came in, Britishers want to what we called channelize the Indians because they don't want another 1857 type of revolt. So they started to channelize the Indian energy into something called safety valve theory that we will see in later slides. Safety valve theory and establishment of Indian National Congress. So that this drain of wealth starts the Indian national movement. Okay, so the evolution of relationship between the British authority and the states. If you see, this is a political policy that from a stage of what you called from a stage of companies struggle to equality with Indian states, from a state of subordination, they wanted to become equal. So this was the position what they had what we call prior to the 1757. So starting with the Anglo-French rivalry in 1751, Lord Dupleix, the East India Company asserted its political identity with the capture of the Arcot in 1751. And this Battle of Plassey changed the course of Indian history, where for the first time a colonial power acquires a territorial and political power, and this brought in what we called the equality of the Britishers on equal with the Indians. And in after the battle of what we called 1765, 1764 Battle of Buxar, the Allahabad Treaty, where in 1765 they acquired the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This changed the Britishers from a trading company to a significant dominant political power. And we have seen from 1665 to 1813 the policy of ring fence. The Britishers, they treated the Indian natives as an independent states. By that time, British had not become a supreme power. So they could not interfere everywhere or nor could not claim any complete sovereignty or territorial what you call the rights. And so they started this what you call the subsidiary alliance system in policy. They started to befriend the native rulers and they became their allies. So the wars against the Mysore, the four Anglo-Mysore wars, and the treaty with the Hindu, what we call the king, uh, in the fourth Anglo-Mysore war in 1799, after the death of Tipu Sultan, and also the first and second Maratha wars, and the treaty with the Awadh kingdom and Hyderabad Nizam, and the treaty with the Amritsar with Ranjit Singh. All these things were made so that the territories of the Britishers were safeguarded, and all these territories, whether it is Mysore or Maratha Kingdom or Hyderabad or the Amritsar, all these areas became buffer state. And the wars and the subsidiary treaties by Lord Wellesley with different rulers made the British a supreme power while their allies, uh, the native Indian rulers, became the dependent. And but the Indian, what they called native kingdoms, they when you assess their relations, two things were clearly visible with respect to the relationship between the native rulers and the British. The first thing is that the policy which was reflected by Lord Warren Hastings against the Anglo-Maratha wars and also the Anglo-Mysore wars is to create a buffer zone where this buffer zone will be used to defend the company's frontiers. And the main threat during that time, why Lord Warren Hastings played this policy of buffer zone or buffer states, is that their main threat was the Marathas and Afghan invaders. So this policy of ring fence is a doctrine. It was enacted by Warren Hastings, which they mastered from Lord Dupleix, that they started interfering that in order to defend their neighbors' frontiers, in order to safeguard their own territories in the guise of defending the neighbors' frontiers, they started this buffer state. And this was reflected by the British East India Company in the war against Marathas and war against the Mysore with respect to Tipu Sultan. And this Wellesley's policy of the subsidiary alliance was an extension of this ring fence policy, which sought to reduce the status of the native states to a position of equality, to a position of dominance, where Britishers were dominant and the Indians were at the mercy of them. The major powers which accepted this subsidiary alliance system were Mysore, Hyderabad, Awadh, Marathas, Sikhs. All these people accepted, and thus the British supremacy over the Indians and their territories established. So from 1813 onwards till 1857, where the policy of subordinate isolation. The subordinate isolation uh, is an imperial idea, and this theory of paramountcy, Lord Hastings, he wanted this Victorian type of what he call dominant power. He wanted to make England great, so they started this paramountcy to develop their own interest, and Indian states were reduced to the act of submission. And now Indians became subordinate. They became what you call submissive. They have to come under the control of a superior power, and they have to cooperate with the British. And Indians from a subordinate position, they had to acknowledge the British supremacy. This was the same position the British were from 1600 to 1757 for 150 years. But after 50, 60 years, after Battle of Plassey, this whole scenario changed where Indians became subordinate to the Britishers. And the native states, they surrendered all forms of sovereignty, their external relations, and though they got sovereignty in internal administration, the Britishers played this what you called the divide and rule policy. They started appointing the British residents, and they were transforming this diplomatic agents of foreign power to executive, and they were controlling these officers, and thus these the native states lost their total independence. Once they lost their land, they lost their army, they lost their foreign relation, they lost their Diwani, they lost their Nizami. British residents started controlling everything. And this 1833 Charter Act, this act ended the British East India Company's commercial functions while it retained the political functions. And this British East India Company, they adopted the practice of, they insisted that a native ruler should get any approval, they should get sanction from the British authority in all matters of succession. So now native ruler do not have even the right to name a successor. He had to take approval and sanction. If not, it will not be, he cannot, his successor cannot claim any territorial what we call claim. So in 1834, after 1833 Charter Act, the Board of Directors met in England. They issued some guidelines to annex states wherever possible and whenever. This policy of annexation, it culminated in usurping of 6 major states by Lord Dalhousie and some big states such as Satara, Jhansi. And according to that, you have this Sambalpur, all these areas, they come under the British paramount power. From, from 1857, after the what you called the revolt of the various people, the peasants, the artisans, sepoys, common man, the religious, all these people who were affected, they saw the change in administration where British comes to direct control through Government of India Act. They assume the direct responsibility of administering India by the British Queen. And because of this, what you called the fidelity of the native state rulers during this 1857 revolt, they can use the native states the potential use as what you called as a breakwaters in political storms in future. This policy of annexation was abandoned because of the native rulers were very much loyal to the British, and there was a new policy was to brought in that the Britishers did not have mercy. They did not annex, but they wanted to punish or depose any native ruler or Indians. This policy that 1858, that this Government of India Act brought in the crown. Now the fiction of Mughal Empire was resurrected, and they wanted to end and they wanted to put an end to the any uprising. So they ended this Mughal Empire, and they sanctioned all matters of succession. Everything crown will decide, and now the crown became the unquestioned power. They became the paramount power and ruler. So now the entire administration, land and everything goes from the hands of for the British East India Company to the British Crown, and this was a gift which was gifted. The Indians were gifted to the British Crown, and moreover, the fiction of Indian states standing with the British is a fiction, and now the paramount power. Now the Britishers became Crown became the paramount power. So the Indian states, the native states which stood with the British in 1857 revolt, was acknowledged as independent sovereign states, and this ended with what you call Queen adopting the title Kesar-e-Hind, or this title as Queen Empress of India was brought in. This title after 1858 Queen's proclamation, and this paramount supremacy of crown, it's presupposed and implied the subordination of all states, and Queen Empress becomes the ruler of India. So the question: arrange the following policies of the British in chronological order in the context of evolution of relations between the British authority. First, the company's struggle for equality from position of subordination, policy of ring fence, policy of subordinate isolation, policy of subordinate union. Which of the following is correct sequence? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 3. Aritra,
Sir,
Ramachandra,
I think A, I think.
Shifana, what is the answer? Mubashira, Ramachandran, what is the answer? Ramachandran, Mubashira, Shifana. Okay. Yes, the answer is right, because the company struggle from a position to subordination to equality, that is from 1600 to 1757. 1600 to 1757. And after 1757, the policy of ring fence comes into, where buffer states created till 1813. From 1813 onwards till 1857, you had the policy of subordinate isolation. From 1858 till 1935, you had you have this policy of subordinate union. Are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any doubts you have? Any questions you have? So this completes the economic policy, the drain of wealth, the 1857. Okay. Any queries? You have any doubts? You have any clarifications? Aritra.
Sir, no clarification, but one thing, sir, sir, previous day, sir, you told about subsidiary alliance of Lord Wellesley. Sir, previous to that, in during the Carnatic War, sir, the thing that Basi was made in Hyderabad, it was also similar to that subsidiary alliance only by the French,
Yes,
sir.
yes. Actually, this what you said is right. The subsidy alliance treaty, which the Wellesley and other Hastings and other British governor generals till Dalhousie, they started to another level. But this original policy belongs to French. It was Lord Dupleix who proposed this theory. First time, Lord Dupleix is one of the ablest generals. So he started understanding the Indian politics and mentality. He studied the Indians. So he started this what he called for the first time that colonial power can get benefited from the rivalry between two native states. So this colonial power will support one rival claimant, and this rival claimant will make a pact treaty with this colonial power, and this colonial power will supply all the materials, ammunitions, and even supply forces, and they will stand with them, and they will defeat that native ruler's enemy. Once that fellow is defeated, this native ruler will be what we call recognized as the ruler of that particular state, and he will have to pay his gratitude to the colonial power. So he has to pay them money, and moreover they will be getting some kind of territories, and finally what will happen is that once what we call they've faced victory, slowly the colonial power will what we call confuse the mind, and also slowly start to tell that the native ruler, you don't fight the war, you just support, our troops will go and fight it, and you just pay. So what happened? The native ruler who had his own army, who just taken the support of the colonial power, lost his independence. Now he'll pay the support. He'll pay the subordinate role. The primary role will be paid by the colonial ruler. And once this colonial ruler, what he call, starts to fight on his behalf, he will say, "Okay, now I'm going fighting your enemy. I will put a permanent stationed army. They will be looking after what we call all the external relation, and any aggression from any person, your enemies, with us, with the native kingdom, we will come and we will fight for you. You have to pay for the upkeeping of this army, and this upkeeping of this army, it is not for the safeguard. Slowly there are two agenda. One is that directly the colonial power cannot go and usurp the land. Slowly they are playing because they are understanding the mentality of Indian politics. Once they go and try to capture the what you call the land, they will what you call slowly start to extract more and more money for the upkeeping, and slowly they will say that we will uh, look after the what we called the external relations, and the native ruler will say that you look after only the police functions. Diwani, we will revenue collection we will take, and moreover we will appoint our own person, and this person called resident, he will look after both the Diwani, and slowly he will be made as the deputy Nawab or the deputy ruler, and he will control this Nizami functions through his own officials, and slowly the native ruler will lose its independence from a position of equality, from a position of subordinate, finally subjugation. So this was followed by, propounded by Lord Dupleix. It was implemented in Carnatic War 1, and Carnatic War 1, Lord Robert Clive was taken in battle, in siege of Madras, and in the Treaty of Madras, Robert Clive was taken as the prisoner, and he was released, and brought Lord Robert Clive was an official in Madras in the Fort St. George. So once he went and he understood this politics, which was mastered by Lord Dupleix, he goes and implements the same thing, what he called in Carnatic War 2. Because during the same time, you have in Bengal Battle of Plassey. From this defeat, what happens? Battle of Plassey takes place simultaneously. Lord Robert Clive implements this policy, tests in Carnatic, and he is successful. And Lord Dupleix was sent away to the Treaty of Paris, and Lord Robert Clive of the British, he once tasting this what we call this success, he goes back to Bengal, and there he plays this what we call this politics, where he supports the rival claimant and this battle of Plassey and Buxar, and the money which they got in is routed back again to South India, and that is how the French were defeated, in the Battle of Trichinopoli in the Carnatic War 3. And they, at the same time, though they lost there, the French had its influence in Hyderabad because of this system was there, and slowly Britishers mastered it and they usurped the territory of Nizam. Okay, but this policy originally belongs to French only, Lord Dupleix, and later it was took over by Lord Robert Clive. From Lord Robert Clive, Warren Hastings, and other were Lord Wellesley, Lord Hastings, all these mastered it. Okay,
Yes, sir.
Mubashira, any doubts? Ramachandran, Shifana. Any questions? Are you understanding? Please open your mic and tell me. Ramachandran,
சார்
ஏதாவது டவுட் இல்லையாப்பா உனக்கு?
இல்லை சார்.
Okay, Shifana. Okay, shall we close for the day?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for
Thank
patiently.
you, sir.
And don't worry, I will provide notes. Okay, I'm preparing and send it to you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.